I was born into a Roman Catholic family. My grandparents on both sides were very faithful, regular churchgoers. My parents, not so much. I think their strategy for educating their children religiously was get them through the Catholic confirmation process, and then they can take it from there. At least that's how it seemed to me, because I finished the confirmation process at age 8, and we stopped going to church shortly thereafter. I'm my father's son, and he was very much an analytic rationalist. And because he was so influential on me, I pretty much followed in his footsteps. So by the time I entered high school, I was an agnostic. By that I mean I did not know intellectually whether God existed, but from a practical standpoint, I pretty much lived like he did not. And by the time I graduated high school, I was fully in the atheist camp. Now, atheism for me offered several advantages. First of all, the moral relativism was attractive. Secondly, my free will was untethered from any rules or obligations, and it provided me an opportunity to live a pleasure-seeking life without guilt. So I liked atheism. I began working at age 16 at a place called Bob's Big Boy. There were a chain of restaurants here in the valley. And I worked as a junior and senior in high school, and then all the way through college. In my senior year of college, I began working with 2 young women who were both very religious. One was Mormon, and one was a Oneness Pentecostal. And they were both committed to converting me. So we'd have some very interesting discussions. I loved debating with people of faith. It made me feel intellectually superior because I had my arguments prepared, and they usually did not. And these 2 young women were not really any different. I felt like I won every debate. But I noticed something odd at the end of the debates. They always walked away with a smile on their face. And I was frustrated. I mean, it did not make sense to me. Why should they get to smile and be happy, and I was the one frustrated? I won the debate, and they lost it. Should have been the other way around. So one time I was arguing with the Pentecostal young lady, and she stopped in the middle of it and said, she was always quoting scripture to me, and she stopped in the middle of it and said, "Nick, it's obvious you've never really read the Bible because you don't know who Jesus is at all." So I responded flippantly, "Fine, give me your stupid book, and I'll prove you wrong from the book itself." That turned out to be a strategic error on my part, because as soon as I started reading Matthew, I immediately recognized that she was right. I did not know who Jesus was, and I did not know what he taught and how he lived his life. But it was immediately apparent to me that there was something different about him, and I slowly became fascinated with who Jesus was. Mark followed Luke, Mark followed Matthew, Luke followed Mark, and John followed Luke. And by the time I got to the end of this, my whole intellectual foundation in atheism was a bit rocky. Now, I was a senior. I was going to graduate and start my career, and I wanted this issue settled in my mind. In those days, you used to buy your books at an actual physical bookstore, and I went to bookstores often because I was an avid reader, but I spent most of my time in the science fiction and fantasy area. Sometimes I'd go over to philosophy, and I admit to a small dalliance with Eastern mysticism in my late teen years, but I never went to the religious section. Why would I? I was an atheist. But I found myself in the religion section looking for something to help me make sense of what I was reading in the Gospels about Jesus. And I ran across this little book called Mere Christianity by someone named C.S. Lewis. I didn't know anything about Lewis. I didn't know he was a popular apologist for Christianity. I just was attracted by the blurb on the back, which said that he would provide the intellectual foundations for the Christian faith. And this is exactly what I was looking for. Well, I don't know if you've ever heard about C.S. Lewis or read his book, Mere Christianity, but I've been reading Christian books for 45 years now. I've read thousands of them, and that's still the book I consider the most influential in my life outside of the Bible, so I highly recommend it. But what it created in me was really a crisis of faith, because I was now not sure that I was right. I was now not sure that God actually did not exist. And so I began talking to anybody who would listen to me. I talked to my wife, Diane. We were married. I was 22. It was weird because we started dating at 15, and we had never talked about religion at all. So I really didn't know what she believed. Turns out she did believe that God exists, even though her faith was very embryonic. So we were talking about it, and I said, well, maybe we should go to a church and just see what that is like. I know I didn't want to go to the Mormon church because I'd read the Book of Mormon, and that was exactly what I expected the Bible to be, although it wasn't. It was a book of myths. I did go to the Oneness Pentecostal church, but that was not my cup of tea, I guess I would say. It was very emotional, and the preaching seemed shallow to me. So I knew that Clyde Smith, who was one of the owners of Bob's Big Boy, was religious, and I asked him if he went to church. He said, yes, I go to the Campbell Church of Christ. You should try it sometime. That's the extent of the conversation we had. But the next Sunday, Diane and I walked through these doors. The people were very friendly, but what really got me was the sermon. Mike Armour was the preacher then, and I don't know if you know Mike, but I would have to say that in my life, he's probably one of the 5 smartest people I've ever met. And his sermon really captivated me. So after the service, I went up and introduced myself and Diane, and he offered to meet with me. That began a series of studies, and I became a complete pest. I was pestering Mike with every question and debate and argument I could think of. He was patient, he was kind, and he was convincing. 3 months later, Diane and I were baptized. Now, I like to think that I've grown a little bit and changed from that young man of 22, but at the core, we're still the same. He pestered everybody he knew about his faith, and some of his family have now come to Christ. Some of Diane's family have now come to Christ. Some friends have come to Christ, and some strangers have come to Christ. But we both are the same in one way. That Nick and this Nick. We are both still in the first hour of the first day of the first week of our walk with Christ. And I'm excited about what the future holds. One of my favorite verses is 1 Corinthians 2:9. No eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has conceived of that which God has in store for those who love him. I cannot conceive of what my future will be like, but I know it will be glorious, and I can't wait.